Welcome to Jargon, a podcast bringing clarity to commonly misunderstood business concepts. We're debunking and simplifying the buzzwords and ideas plaguing today's business world and offering a fresh perspective on these topics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jargon. My name is Todd Boutte, and today I'm joined by Troy Cavazos. Troy, what's on the agenda today?
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me, first of all.
Of course.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit about change management. Change management is extremely important. When you have a portfolio of initiatives or a project going on at a company, you can have a successful strategy and plan and stick to it. But as we know, people are your most important asset. And so if your people are not behind in terms of the change going on and you don't have the proper plan to walk with them in this change, then your project and the plan you had can really fall short of the expectations. So really excited to talk about some change management today.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the most important things we can put up front is how important we find change management to every aspect of every project we do. And a lot of the nuts and bolts of this that we'll talk about really could be applied to any circumstances in your daily life where you need to kind of work through a change, large or small. But Trinergy really emphasizes this because it's a core conceit when it comes to having a successful project. If you can't work through the conflicts that will arise because of change, you can't communicate it properly, you can't lead it properly, you're going to have less chance of making the overall project successful. So that's why we build it into all our methodologies and all of our projects. And really that starts with the idea that there's no project too small to really have a change management mentality. So our thought today was we'd kind of just go through some of the big core concepts and then leave it open-ended for you all to reach back out and keep this conversation rolling.
Right, Todd. So in terms of these places that we can highlight in terms of change management, just want to start off, what do you think is the role that leadership plays? When there's a lot of change happening in an organization, what role is leadership supposed to play in terms of deploying some change going on in an organization?
For me, it's really two key things. Number one is communication. That's the one that I always prioritize the most in change. You can't over-communicate what's happening, in our opinion. So how that manifests in our projects are things like status meetings and kickoff meetings and delivering our messaging in multiple ways, which we'll talk about. But when people don't hear from the folks that they trust the most, the aspects of their life that will be changing it's not going to sink in quite as well. So what you really want to do as a leader is set the tone and make sure to communicate and then listen. All right, that's the second piece of the communication. But setting the tone is important. A leader is generally, whether they like it or not, going to be a role model, and ultimately the person that should be accountable for the change. So how all those things dovetail together gives your employees, your colleagues, your customers, your vendors, whatever, gives them confidence in the fact that what you're changing is going to be valuable and why you're changing actually has some merit. So we'll go into more communicating later, but to me, the leadership role is always about how everything is going to roll back up to them. Being a good role model, communicating and listening, and being accountable for change.
Right.
Absolutely.
That sounds like some great characteristics of a leader in an organization, is especially useful in a time of change. So
yes, you always want your anchor, right? That's going to be key. And so another concept kind of in this same vein is distributed leadership. It's not something that we kind of have in our outline for the day, but there is that concept that the larger the organization gets, the less likely you can be able to lean on a singular person.
Sure.
That's natural. So distributing leadership and these concepts down, empowering departments, senior roles, getting everybody aligned to be an accountable leader, to be a good role model, to be a good communicator, those are, obviously a factor as well. Can't overlook those. So that doesn't mean that your employees, your colleagues, your vendors, everybody that I just talked about is going to just accept change as fact. Right. So we need to talk about hesitancy to change and resistance to change, how that sort of manifests.
Of course, no matter what, if you have great leadership in play and they're exhibiting open communication and they're showing confidence in the direction that the company's going, it is inevitable you will still see some resistance from employees, right? They're used to their day-to-day activities. They're used to their 8 to 5, 9 to 5 looking the same every day, right? So I think the key to resistance to change and combating that is really giving them the tools to be successful. We've had a client where a lot of resistance was seen because the vision wasn't becoming clear in their head because they lacked the proper hardware in order to meet the future technology that was being implemented. And so something as simple as a second monitor helped an employee feel more empowered and feel like the leadership was giving them the tools to be successful at the organization.
Right. And this is a pretty recent real world example. So how did you guys surface this tension? How did you figure this out?
Right. So another, way to combat resistance to change is training, of course. But we're in the middle of training an employee on a new software and, utilizing basic Microsoft Office skills as well as utilizing a field data software system. Mm-hmm. And we were realizing that in order to analyze and view larger amounts of data that was being captured in field operations, that people in back office functions weren't able to view large amounts of data and parse through them because they were limited just by having one monitor. And so we realized that their efficiency in analyzing data, finding what they needed in order to generate billing and invoices was a lot, of course, more easy to navigate when they had more screens to work off of. And it's funny, the employee even said, can I get a third monitor after 40 years at the company? Used to paper and very manual processes, and with technology, as soon as you give them the tools they need to succeed, they're on board and they're behind the mission of the organization, and they see the value in the speed and the efficiency. And once they have that hardware, they're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a really interesting story because it fits into the category of the resistance chain being very passive, right? It was more about comfort in current processes rather than any active fight on the employee's behalf. And that's a hard thing to surface. The employee's not exhibiting any outward signs of being upset or hesitancy or saying, no, I'm not doing that. They're just sort of comfort, right? It's just sitting in that same role day to day. And, probably the underlying issue was really the communication. And you guys and the team there, as things change, right, the communications improved, observations of this employee's behavior, right, changed, and all of a sudden they've got a new lease on life. That's a good win.
Yes.
It's a good win. Now, it's not always that easy. I guess I could say that next, right? So a lot of times you encounter resistance to change that's a bit more active. We will have stories from time to time of clients of ours, and there is this kind of active resistance, and that could manifest as just anger, frustration, born out of fear, maybe born out of poor communication. We don't know always. Born out of concerns for their job security, could be that. And then they start to take on the persona of causing you sort of active problems rather than really these sort of passive or comfort problems. And addressing those is very critical. So, a few ways that we can do that is coming back to the first thing I mentioned under leadership is communication, right? You traditionally cannot over-communicate what's happening in a business. The best way to reinforce all the underlying mission and vision statements of a company is really addressing in public, or privately inside the company, if that's a better way to look at it, but really communicating what's happening all the time, or at least providing the information in some way that people can go get it. You can't, traditionally expect everybody to read every email, but you can do things like post flyers about things, change the method of communicating with them. And again, we want to spend a whole section on that in a little bit, but addressing that resistance through communication is critical. And really that bolts right on to being transparent. Again, being transparent with the plans for the future as well. So not just the plans that support the current mission and vision, but what are the plans for the next step for a company? Because that is going to bring in people like us that come to do big projects at a company. And if there hadn't been sort of the culture of communication around a change that's forthcoming, people see consultants roll in, and what's the first thing they think of? It's terrible to think that way, but that is kind of the gut reaction of people.
When you talk about communication and being able to have a simple messaging to your employees, what are your thoughts, for leadership that's going to be communicating this change? What would you say in order to, combat that resistance to change? How can a leader have simple messaging to their employees and not come in with big consultant or, strategy words whenever it's any complex process or technology changes in the organization?
It's a complex needle to thread. It really is, because mission and vision statements, which are kind of or should be the guiding factor into what you're doing at the company, become a little verbose, they come a little flowery, a little bit political, not in the like capital P version of that word, but they become part of the structure that is a little bit flowery. So how do you simplify it? I think the best way to do that is consider the audience and speak in a way where your end goal of your messaging is to tell that person what's in it for them. How does it make their life better?
Right.
Now, everybody's role might make that messaging different. And that's why it's very important when you're delivering messaging that you're thinking about the audience. Okay. So number one, think about that audience. Think about the channel you communicate with that audience in. If this is let's say a night shift or overnight shift at a warehouse, you're not going to have the same channel to communicate with that group as your accountants. You're just not. It's not going to be everybody get in the conference room, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint kind of messaging. It's not. It's probably going to be best delivered by a shift supervisor or some sort of lead in a position that has been through the day-to-day of that audience. And that's a good opportunity right there to delegate communication, to delegate some authority down through your leadership chain. And then again, focus on what's in it for them. So in the case of a new ERP system, if we can roll back to what Trenergy does very often, is we select, recommend, and then implement ERP systems. Very common for us. But in the case of this, overnight shift worker, what could you say about an ERP system? What could we help our clients say that they could pass down to, a shift supervisor? It might be something as simple as, hey, you know how our forklifts are always broken? Well, you know why they're always broken? Is because we have no maintenance schedule. We have no systems around this place. We have no processes in place to make sure our equipment works all the time. And guess what, guys? That is dangerous, okay? So one of the things, along with a bunch of stuff you won't ever see, that we're going to put in place is a better warehouse management system that's got our maintenance, it's got better logging of our equipment, keeps better track of our stuff. We're going to protect you guys. We're going to make your lives easier.
I love that first comment you made. I think there's a unity in problem identification.
Sure.
Across an organization is a very strong tool. When leadership is communicating change and everyone across a company can agree on one certain pain point that makes their life harder, say, hey, we're bringing in A, B, or C, whatever, to make your life easier at this pain point, and everyone can kind of get behind that mission. So that's a great example and a really cool tool that is should be used by leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the the other channels are kind of evident, I think, but it's worth bringing them up in some scenarios. Forgive me. What I'm getting at is there are certain channels or changes in an industry that can't be delivered kind of broadly. This is what I'm trying to say here. And I would not ask somebody to give up the idea that communicating a change one-on-one is the most appropriate. And that may very well be the top of the chain kind of conversations, a CEO to a CFO, and then distribute it down from there. But one-on-one might be the appropriate channel. So, can't skip out on that.
Great.
Encouraging feedback is another piece of this puzzle that we don't want to leave out. I mentioned communication earlier, but listening is just equally as important. So in the same manner that we speak to the communication channels and simplifying messaging and things, we don't want to make any of those things look one-directional. So we find it very important to encourage feedback in these sessions, whether it's giving people opportunity to report things up a chain confidentially or in public forums or by way of some sort of internal group or union, whatever it might be open to the communication flowing upwards to you is really critical as well. It's worthwhile that your company culture and the actual day-to-day lives of the employees actually contribute to the mission and the vision in ways you might not commonly expect. So we want to address that in our change management plans as well, that communication is truly bidirectional. So we'll do coaching and sessions in that space as well, so that employees hear from our clients, but they're also heard from.
Right. So I think, really kind of going into this last area that we want to highlight, we've kind of been touching at it throughout the conversation, but it's really communicating change. And I think a big part of communicating change, like you said, from leadership, right? There's going to be resistance, but I think this last point is the ability to empower employees.
Yeah, the basic, I think what you're pulling at is that change begets change, or enthusiasm begets more enthusiasm, right? So the notion that you can coach up your employees by way of a formalized communication plan or some sort of culture shift in an organization, it only takes like 1 or 2 sparks to ignite a fire, right? That's the idea that we see when change is very successful. We'll often do this when piloting very substantial change. We'll pick out a department that's like really amped up, or we get a good read on a particular department that can be a champion internally. Those internal folks can do way more to spread change than we can as outsiders.
I think that empowerment that comes with choosing or selecting a champion internally, and I think when there's a lot of change, you might often feel that top-down, addressing and communication. But when it becomes more of a horizontal communication, and you pick someone from within to communicate change, get trained, and become kind of an internal expert when it comes to the change that is coming, and that kind of understands that vision well, and from a high level can understand the implications of the changes that they're making. So I think there's a lot of value, of course, in having and selecting that champion internally and carefully choosing who is going to get behind this mission and ensure that the optimism of the change really spreads.
Yep, no doubt. Well, thanks so much, Troy. I think what I can close out with real quickly is really just that I think there's 3 key words when we speak to change management, right? It's very cyclical. This is a thing you will do more than once. So if we can leave you with the 3 words here would be prepare, manage, reinforce, over and over and over. All right, prepare is this concept of how you're going to deliver your communication, what the change is, how it's aligned with your mission and vision. Managing the change, right? That is delivering that communication, addressing the resistance, making people feel comfortable with the change, and then reinforcing the change is don't let your change management practice die off, right? Reinforce it, continuously find your leaders and the best methods to deliver the steps forward. So reinforce, prepare, manage, reinforce.
All right. Prepare, manage, reinforce. Thank you, Todd.
Absolutely. Thank you, Troy. And we will do this again another time. For now, if you listeners would like any more information on our change management thoughts and ideas, please visit us at Trenergy.com. You can email me directly at Todd@Trenergy.com, and Troy can be reached at Troy@Trenergy.com. Thanks again, Troy.
Thank you.